Hello everyone, it is your boy Winster and I am back at it again with another video. Today we are doing a hand trap tier list. We are coming ever so close to the end of the year, so what a better time than to put you guys on game on some of the best hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! But before we get started on today's video, guys, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you guys can stay up to date with all the content that drops on this channel. Also, be sure to check out the description box down below. It's going to have a link to all my other platforms. I have a very active Discord, TikTok, Twitch, Twitter, you pull up. Be sure to follow me on all those platforms. I'm excited to talk about the hand traps going into this new year and potentially a new format because the ban list should be dropping soon. But let's jump to it. Before we jump into the tier list, I wanted to go over the tiers themselves. So at the top spot, the best of the best, these cards are great in both the main and the side. You should be playing these cards. Right underneath that, we got good hand traps. Okay in the main, way better in the side. And right underneath that, we got almost unplayable. Do not play these cards in the main, not worth the space in the side deck. And right underneath that, we got situational and more testing is needed, or at least in my opinion. And so this is like an experimental, right? We need to test these cards in the current format to see if they are worth having in the main or the side. Not to say that it's a bad card. And the bottom of the barrel is Jover. Don't play these cards. Whenever we're dealing with tier lists, I think it's important just to knock out the obvious ones, right? One of the first ones I really want to talk about is Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Ash Blossom has been a staple hand trap for years now, ever since its release, which at the time I wasn't playing, but there has been a format, or maybe there's been one or two, where it just wasn't as good. Not that it was bad. It's always been a phenomenal card. It's always been great. Always played in the main. And definitely one of the best hand traps. There's no argument there. I wanted to talk about one of my personal favorite hand traps of all time, Infinite Impermanence. Infinite Impermanence has so much going for it. It's a trap card, not once per turn. It doesn't make Thrust or Talons live. It is such a good card, defensively, offensively. Has a little bonus effect, right, where you negate the column. I think the only bad side to Infinite Impermanence is that if your opponent has a card to remove the target when you activate it, it whiffs. I think that's literally the only bad side to it. But it's such a good staple, such a good staple. And I personally think that it's better than Ash Blossom. In my personal opinion, it's definitely way better than Ash Blossom. So let's go ahead and talk about Effect Veiler, one of the best hand traps of all time. In my personal opinion, it's up there with Imperm and Ash Blossom. Not once per turn, you discard the card. It does have the same flaws like Imperm has in terms of targeting if it's removed by your opponent. But it is a little bit weaker because it does make Thrust and Talons live. And on top of that, you're only allowed to use this on your opponent's turn, where Infinite Impermanence could be used on either turn. But it's still just as strong. And I think it is definitely one of the best hand traps. Definitely phenomenal card. DD Crow. I think it's the oldest card on this tier list. I think maybe Effect Veiler might be just as old, but I think that DD Crow is actually older than the card. But DD Crow in these past couple of formats since Pearly became a thing, it's been really strong. The Bystios kind of replaced DD Crows in the format because they gave you not only the banishment that DD Crow offers, but they also give you a body. But the problem with the Bystios is they only could do light and dark monsters where DD Crow could banish anything. And considering how strong Pearly was with recycling those spell cards from the grave, it's just such a good card. Or any card that targets something in the grave. It is so good. And because of that, I definitely think it's worth playing. It's definitely up there with the greats, and if not one of the best hand traps in this current format, because it could target anything. Ghost Mourner. I think Ghost Mourner is one of my favorite Ghost Sisters, if not Ghost Ogre. Those cards look so badass in my opinion. I really like the energy that they give off. They look so sick. But Ghost Mourner is up there with like Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence in terms of what they do, right? They target monsters and negate the effects. The one downside that it could only target special summon monsters. It does have a little bit of a bonus effect where damage. It does suffer the same nuances that Imperm and Effect Veiler do in terms of removing the target before the chain resolves. And it could only target special summon monsters. And on top of that, it is only once per turn. I do think that it is a good card. It is, in my opinion, way better in the side and very situational. And I think there has to be a little bit more testing, but by no means is it a bad card. But I don't think that it is the right card for the current format or even the formats to come. So I definitely think it is situational. More testing is needed. Definitely experimental. Let's go ahead and talk about Ghost Ogre. Now, I really want to talk about this card's capacity in this coming format. With Fire Kings and Centurion being a thing, this card could get rid of those problematic cards, continues field spells, continues traps that Centurions become, and definitely worth looking into. But I do think that this card is not really necessary in the current format. In the current metagame, I don't think it really has a place, but it's not a bad card. It definitely does its job well with specific matchups. It's really good against Hapurli, right? They could destroy the continuous field spell or the continuous spell or the field spell. But I do think that this card is at least worth looking into. And because of that, I definitely think that in the future, if those decks do pop off, I would say that this card is, okay in the main, way better in the side if those decks take off. With the states where those decks are, and this card only being really good in a few matchups, it's not really worth having in the side deck. A little bit more experimenting is needed and definitely situational. All right, let's talk about my least favorite Ghost Sister, Ghost Belle. From a competitive standpoint, I don't really see Ghost Belle having a big foot or a big impact in the current meta. In the future, it may be different, but in the current moment or in the current month, at least I don't see this card being really a competitive staple. There are much better options that you could use, and the big downside to the card, in my opinion, is that it's once per turn. Cards like DD Crow and Bystials having multiple names, and those decks that do play Bystials have multiple copies of those multiple names. I don't think a Ghost Belle is really going to do much, in my opinion. Because of that, I don't think it's worth the space, and it's almost unplayable in the current format. Not to be confused that this card is bad, I just don't think that it is necessary, and there are much better options. And the cards that do counter this, including itself being once per turn, are just too strong. Alright, let's talk about Ghost Reaper. I'm going to be straight up with you guys. I don't think this card has any kind of footprint in the current competitive meta right now. I don't think it's going to have a footprint in the future. I don't think it's a necessary card by any standpoint. Even though the Ghost Sisters theme is pretty sick, I don't think you need to play this card. You shouldn't play this card at all. I don't think it's situational by any kind of capacity. It's unfortunate, but it's going to be our first victim in being it's Jover. Don't play this card. Ghost Reaper was going to be the last one, but unfortunately it is Spooky Dogwood. Do not play this card. It's Jover, baby. It's Jover. It's Jover. Jover. So the next two cards I really wanted to talk about, kind of a package deal from my point of view. One is paid in the main and one is played in the side, and they're really interchangeable. It just really depends on the format. And sometimes these cards are bad against rogue strategies. Not that all rogue strategies don't do searching or summon more than 5, but I personally think that sometimes these cards could really falter against them, and that's Nibiru, Androl, and Lockbird. It just sucks when your opponent searches one time, you draw them, and that does literally nothing, and they just continue to play. Or a very smart, intelligent player is going to look at how many summons they do, and they're going to set up the Omni Negate or stop at 4 summons. And it's just the worst when you have these cards sitting in your hand just rotting. And because of that, I do think that they kind of switch whenever you watch deck profiles. Someone is playing the Droll in the main or the side, and they have Nibiru in the other spot, right? So those two are interchangeable in my opinion. Let me know if you agree in the comment section. And because of that, I do think that they're good hand traps, but they are very, very better in the side. You don't know what you're going to really run into competitive format because there are so many decks to account for, and it's just so hard sometimes to really, all right, I'm going to run into this, no doubt about it. And sometimes you just want to have an answer, and I think that's why they are okay in the main, but way better on the sides. They had to do it to my boy, man. They had to do it to him. Gamma. Gamma is a phenomenal card. Phenomenal. This card could get ashed, but it still stays in your hand because that shit is not once per turn. This card, when at 3, phenomenal. It's unfortunate that you have to play a brick, but this card negates and destroys. And the decks that could run it at a really good level usually didn't need to have a monster on the field. A good example was D-Link. Because Gamma, on how strong it is, and it's unfortunately that they butchered the boy to 1, I think it almost makes the card unplayable. Not to say that you're not going to run it, but if you're going to run it, it's going to be in the main, but it's unfortunately has to be at a 1. And because you have to play the 1 of and the 1 of brick, it's definitely not worth it in my point of view. And because of that, I think it's almost unplayable. And it's too good of a card, too good of an effect to put in Jover, especially in the current format. Because if you draw the 1 of Gamma, it's going to go crazy. But I don't think it's worth playing. Contact C. It sucks that Contact C's effect on paper is phenomenal. Right, restricting your opponent to using this awkward ass insect earth, I think, monster, and it's an awkward level as well. Super good on paper, but in this current format, with the release of SP Little Knight, this card is rendered almost useless. The moment your opponent summons something, you could give them this card. Well, that's great because now your opponent could go into SP Little Knight or IP Masquerena. I personally don't think it's worth playing right now. The moment SP is banned, because maybe soon it will, I don't know, that card is too strong, then this card could maybe be playable. Because of SP Little Knight and IP Masquerena, almost in every single deck at the moment, this card is unplayable. Do not play it. You're just giving your opponent an extra body. So because of that, I think it's Jover. I hate talking about it. I hate giving it free promo. But D-Shifter, there's no way it's going to be in any other tier other than best of the best. If you can run this card, you should be playing this card. Right? The decks that do run it are going to run it in the main. They're going to run 3 copies of it. This card effectively shuts down a whole turn. It is phenomenal in Exo Sisters. It is phenomenal in what was Kashtira, even though there's still remnants of that deck running around. Right? They just don't have the good boss monster. This card is such a good card. It shuts anything that requires any kind of graveyard effect because it is going to be shut down. Because of this card, specific cards like Forbidden Droplet, Ultimate Slayer, cards that send cards to the graveyard as costs, you cannot activate those effects. And then it's just too strong, in my opinion. Even though it doesn't have the utility like DD Crow effect for an imperm, I do think it is one of the best if you could play it. Lancia. Personally, one of my favorite cards as well. It's such a cool card, such a great effect. The one downside to this card is it could only be used on your opponent's turn. Yes, it effectively turns off Shifter, or effectively turns off Runic, effectively turns off Bystios, anything that vanishes, it just turns it off. But it could only be used on your opponent's turn. Who thought this at Konami? Like, let me play this in a defensive manner, right? Or offensive manner, right? Let me use this card's utility that you're giving it in either way. But it's unfortunate because of that restriction only being played on your opponent's turn, even though it does have a little bit of a niche and it is somewhat usable and somewhat impactful. I think it falls in this category. Almost unplayable because of the restriction. Also not worth the space, but it is decent at best. And also I needed to switch Gamma in front of Ghost Spell because I do think Gamma is better than Ghost Spell. Let's talk about Bystios. Now, this is specifically talking about the quick effect. If your opponent controls a monster, banish a light or dark, special summon the Lubellion Bystio or Bystio Luber. They are not hand traps. But the Bystios are such a good card, right? They have almost the same utility as DD Crow, like I mentioned earlier. They give you a body. In some situations, they give you advantage. They're usually going to be run in a package with like Regained. They give you so much advantage. They give you draw power. But the problem is they only could target light and darks. In the current format, there are not a lot of decks that are the best of the best that have monsters in the grave, or they're even used light or dark monsters. Because of that, I do think Bystios fell off a little bit. And on top of that, Tier Lament, which was this was the perfect counter to Tier Laments. Those have fallen off a little bit as well, or not that that's a bad deck, but because it fell off a bit, I do think Bystios just follow in the same direction. Okay in the main, way better in this side. So the next card I wanted to talk about is Skullmeister. This is one card I forgot on my previous tier list, but Skullmeister has a very similar effect to Ghost Spell. Anything that activates in the grave, just discard this card to the graveyard, negate. There are a couple of advantages that Skullmeister does have over Ghost Spell, is that anything that activates in the grave, you could just negate it by discarding this card. And on top of that, it is not a once per turn effect, but it has to be sent to the graveyard. So if the graveyard is turned off by like Shifter or anything like that, you cannot discard this card as cost, and that is the downside to this card. I do think it's a little bit situational. I could see this card having a little bit more use in the future, and I do think that it's experimental, situational. Again, not that it's a bad card, and I know it's way down here, but I think this is a very situational effect, almost the same as like Ghost Spell, right? It does have the versatility. Last card, guys, on this tier list. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this content, but Phantasme definitely came out at a time where I wasn't playing, so I didn't really get to see this card in its prime. But with Unchained running around, I do think this card has a lot of potential. And SP Little Knight, IP Masquerena, this card has a lot of usage in the current format and even future formats, because I don't think SP Little Knight is going anywhere, because it's in every single deck. And that the same goes for like Linkuriboh and IP Masquerena. Because of that, I do think that it is a good card, way better in the side. I don't think anyone's going to be playing this in the main. In my opinion, you probably shouldn't be playing it in the main. But I do think that it is a good card. It has a lot of it has a lot of versatility, resets your hand a bit. And I do think that it's good, but way better in the side. That's why I think it's at the end here of good, way better on the side. That is gonna be it for today's tier list. I definitely want to get your guys' thoughts and opinions on everything. I want to know how you guys feel about the format, how you guys feel about my tier, moving into the future and in the current format. Let me know in the comments section below, guys. Let me know if you like these videos as well. I'm trying to stay as consistent I can on making tier lists for like maybe decks, board breakers, hand traps. I want to do all the type of content. It's so much fun to talk about it. But let me know in the comment section, guys. That is going to be it for today's video. Let me know how you guys felt about it. Do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, because I know you guys are loving this content. But until next time, guys, I will check you guys out later. My name is Winster, and you guys have a good day. Peace out.